It may not have been the way that we all expected it to end, but it's looking more and more likely that we've watched our last regular season game of the season, so for all of the rookies in the league, their first season is officially in the books. This year's rookie class was pretty fun, and a few of them have already shown some serious star potential, but for today's video, I thought it would be interesting to go back and look at the entire lottery from last year's draft and regrade every selection based on what we know now and have seen so far. Some have outperformed expectations, some have disappointed, and some are changing the narrative around their name from the time of the draft. Before we get into all of that though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting with the first pick in the draft, the New Orleans Pelicans drafted Zion Williamson, who at the time was seen as the consensus #1 prospect, and based on everything we've seen out of him, that sentiment is still very much a fact. We lost most of his season early on because of a knee injury, but when he healed up and returned to the court, he didn't miss a beat, and instantly started dominating anyone and everyone put in front of him. He averaged about 24 points per game, shot 59% from the field, displayed a capable jumper from the perimeter every now and then, and his combination of strength, speed, and athleticism is still unprecedented for someone his size. He's a walking matchup nightmare, and there's no reason to think that he can't put himself in contention to be a top 10 player in the league within a few years. Now, for the grade I'm giving this pick, it's easily an A, and the only reason it's not an A+ in my book is because of the potential threat of injury, because when he is healthy, he's a bona fide star. Next, at pick number 2, the Memphis Grizzlies selected Ja Morant, and like last pick, this was also a home run for the team. Morant played at a mid-major in college, being at Murray State, so up until March Madness began, not many people had actually seen much action from him, but in that tournament, he put on a show and wowed everybody. He was fun, he was genuinely skilled, and he had playmaking instincts at the point guard position that simply can't be taught, and in year 1, all of that was already translating in the NBA. Not only is he putting up an impressive 17.5 points and 7 assists per game, but he's also scoring the ball at a highly efficient 49% from the field, which, if you look historically, most rookie guards struggle mightily with efficiency. On top of all of that, this production is actually impacting winning basketball, and the Grizzlies are set to be a playoff team after many thought they would be one of the worst teams in the whole league. As far as a grade, this pick is an A+, because they landed a future multiple-time All-Star and leader. Next up at pick number 3, the New York Knicks selected RJ Barrett, whose first year in the league has not quite been as successful as those first two. By no means has he been bad, but it's definitely been more up and down. Part of this is because of the situation he came into, part of this is because of the inept people in charge of running the Knicks team, and part of it has to do with himself trying to do too much at times. What makes me hesitant to be too critical of his season this year is the fact that the Knicks were clearly going to struggle from the beginning of the year, and yet they treated the team like a contender, giving mediocre veterans way too big of a role and pushing youth aside as they always do. The ball should have been in Barrett's hands far more than it was this year, but the likes of Julius Randle, who has some of the most empty production throughout his career I've ever seen, dominated possessions far too much. Barrett's a talented player that can give you a little bit of everything, but he won't reach his full potential unless the Knicks as a franchise start to focus on the correct things. I give this pick a solid B, because he's shown that he can be a big-time playmaker in flashes. Next, with the 4th pick, the Atlanta Hawks acquired DeAndre Hunter in a trade, and at the time, he was seen as a fairly safe pick that may not have had as high of a ceiling as others, but his floor as a player was definitely higher than most. His biggest strength as a prospect was as a defensive player, and many viewed him as the best defender in the entire draft. Because of this, the fact that he wasn't that good on D overall this year was a bit disappointing. He was an upperclassman when he came out, so he's an older rookie, which makes those struggles all the more concerning. With that said though, it's obviously only 1 year, and at times he did flash the ability to be a highly impactful defender, so by no means is it time to abandon ship on him, but for a guy taken as high as he was, I am inclined to give this a lower grade than others so far, with my final grade for this pick being a decent C. Next up was the 5th pick in the draft, and here, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Darius Garland. People question the Cavs' motives to draft another point guard after just taking Colin Sexton the year before, but Sexton's game is focused more on scoring the ball, so the hope was that Garland could provide more of a playmaking role alongside him. As a prospect, Garland's best attribute was his shooting ability, and in his first season, he knocked down threes at a league average rate, which can't be said for many rookie guards, so in that regard, he's on the right track, but he didn't really wow in regards to creating for others, which could leave the Cavs in a sticky situation here. He's going to be a solid player in the league, but for the Cavs to double up on shot-creating point guards still looks questionable now, and making the grade for this pick, I'm gonna give it a decent C+. Up next with the 6th pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves traded for the pick to take Jarrett Culver. Culver was the jack-of-all-trades prospect in this year's class, being very good in many areas, but not necessarily great at any one particular thing. He admittedly struggled for the first half of the season this year, but around the All-Star break, he really started to turn things around and show off the potential that had him drafted so high. His defense is solid, he works very well off the ball, and his shot steadily improved as the year went on. I also really like the fit in Minnesota long term because he was always viewed as the Robert Covington replacement, but now with Cov having already been traded, he's going to get even more opportunity moving forward. He'll be a nice member of the team's rotation for a while, and he'll play his role well, so for that, I'll give this pick a nice B grade. Next up with the 7th pick, the Chicago Bulls drafted Coby White. The Bulls have quietly put together a very talented young group of players, but the combination of health woes and poor management and coaching has resulted in the potential of this group not shining through as often as it should. White spent most of the season coming off the bench, and while he got off to a slow start, he absolutely exploded in the last 3 weeks before the league shut down. He scored over 30 points in 3 straight games, and over 20 points in 8 of the last 9 games he played, and his ability to create for himself off the dribble is very promising. By next year, he should be the team's starting point guard, and I really like the odds of him being a big-time scorer at his peak, so this pick for me is a strong A-. Up next with the 8th pick, the Pelicans traded for this pick to take Jaxson Hayes. Hayes is an uber-athletic big man that oozes in potential, but at the same time, he's still incredibly raw as a talent and has a long way to go before he puts it all together. He showed flashes this year of phenomenal play and produced a ton of absurd highlight dunks, but he also made just as many bad rookie mistakes that bring him down to reality. He finishes well around the rim and blocks shots well in limited minutes, but he still needs to learn to play smarter instead of always going for the highlight play. He's still only 19 years old, so he still has plenty of time to develop, and in the future, him and Zion Williamson could be a scary frontcourt duo, so my grade for this pick is a B because of that potential. Next, with the 9th pick, the Washington Wizards drafted Rui Hachimura. On a Wizards team with not much talent, Hachimura has been thrust into a massive role from the get-go as a go-to guy, and at times he's looked brilliant, but because he's a rookie, he's also looked overwhelmed at times by the minutes he's getting and the focus on him at this level, but long-term, this will be very important for his development. He's a promising power forward with versatility at the position that gives him an element of unpredictability. The perimeter shot still needs some work, and he has struggled with the physicality at times, but overall, at the 9th pick, the Wizards got someone that will be legitimately valuable to them, and for that reason, I give this pick a B+. Next, with the 10th pick, the Atlanta Hawks drafted Cam Reddish. Reddish has been highly regarded as a player since high school, but after disappointing at Duke, he slipped a bit in the draft. He has all the physical tools of a potentially great player, but his production on the court just hasn't matched up over the last 2 years. The thing is, though, that while it might be a while before he puts it all together, he has had games this year where he looks like a future problem in the league, despite it being overshadowed by tons of inconsistency. I think because of the Hawks' timeline being much more focused on later than it is now, this is a very ideal landing spot for him because he's going to need a few years of development, and the grade I'd give this investment is a B- because of the uncertainty. Up next with the 11th pick, the Suns shocked everyone when they traded up to select Cam Johnson. At the time, this move seemed ridiculous, and now a year later, I'm still scratching my head. Johnson was one of the oldest players in the draft and was also one of the best shooters, but he's very close to being a finished product and isn't nearly as productive as someone worth taking in the lottery. He is a 40% shooter from deep, but he doesn't really give you much else. Because of that, combined with the fact that the Suns chose not only to trade up for him, but pass up on several incredibly talented players that were still available at the time, I have to give this pick a D grade, and the only reason it isn't an F is because he's definitely not a bust of a player, he just wasn't worth what the team gave up to get him. Up next at pick number 12, the Charlotte Hornets drafted PJ Washington, who, in my opinion, is one of the most quietly good rookies of the year. Being in Charlotte, he hasn't necessarily been talked about all that much, but he has an excellent motor, crashes the boards hard, and showed off a strong outside game well for a power forward. He's a nice, solid player that will give the team good minutes and play his role well, and being a late lottery selection, that's exactly what you should expect. So while it's nothing flashy, the grade I'll give this one is a nice B. Up next with the 13th pick in the draft, the Miami Heat snagged one of the biggest steals of the whole draft, being Tyler Herro. Funnily enough, there were a ton of questions surrounding this pick at the time of the draft, but Herro proved all of those doubters wrong. He has all the makings of a big-time shot maker, and already in year one has shown that he has the it factor in big moments and doesn't shy away. He's already knocked down threes at an almost 40% clip, and he does it while creating a ton off the dribble, so once again, the Heat scouting department nailed it, and this pick garners the rare A+ grade. And finally, the last pick of the lottery by the Boston Celtics was Romeo Langford, and this one's one of the biggest whiffs in the draft. At this point in time, there were still several highly talented players available, most of which were highly regarded at the time of the draft as well, such as Brandon Clark and Matisse Thybulle. But they passed on guys like that for Langford, who had a disappointing season at Indiana and has yet to really show much through 1 year in the league. His jumper still needs a ton of work, as the mechanics and overall production just aren't there, and for a team in win-now mode, he probably won't be breaking into the rotation anytime soon. This pick gets the lowest grade in the video, being an F, because there were so many other places they could have gone with it to get some value. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you would grade these picks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.